Picture this: a sunny afternoon, the hustle and bustle of city life, people rushing from one place to the next, minds occupied with their own worlds. Then there's a moment of tension, a flicker of cruelty. A boy, not much older than 12 or 13, picks up a rock, glances around, and with a deliberate motion, throws it at a homeless man sitting alone on the sidewalk. The crowd doesn't even flinch. Some walk by, some glance away, as if pretending nothing happened. It's just another moment in a day full of countless others. But for the boy, this moment would change everything. You're probably asking yourself, why would he do such a thing? And, even more importantly, who steps in to stop him? That's where this story takes a twist, one you won't see coming. By the end of this video, you'll witness a transformation that will make you rethink how you see others, how you view respect, and what it truly means to be a human being in a world that can sometimes seem cold and indifferent. Stick with me for the next few minutes, because you're about to experience a story that will stick with you long after it's over. Now, I know what you're thinking. This kid must have had some reason for doing something so reckless, right? Was it just a moment of anger or frustration? Or maybe he was just following the behavior of the people around him. But as we dive deeper into the story, you'll begin to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about a boy who threw a rock. It's about the power of influence, the unexpected way that life can teach us lessons we never thought we needed. And more than that, it's about how one person, just one person, can change the trajectory of another's life with nothing but a simple act of kindness and understanding. When the boy throws that rock, something else happens that no one could have predicted. A stranger in uniform, who you might first assume is just another passerby, stops in his tracks. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't scoff. He doesn't shout or berate the boy. Instead, he does something that takes everyone by surprise. And in that single moment, a lesson begins to unfold. One that would stay with the boy and with all of us forever. But here's the catch. The stranger isn't who you might think. He's not someone who's just done his part in society and moved on. He's been through hardships of his own, experienced more than anyone could ever imagine, and yet, he still carries a sense of humanity and compassion that we can all learn from. The encounter that follows is powerful, eye-opening, and will leave you questioning your own actions, your own judgments. This isn't just a lesson for the boy, it's one for all of us. It challenges us to think differently about how we treat others, especially those we overlook or ignore. So, why should you keep watching? Because the answer to what happens next is more than just a twist in the story. It's a wake-up call. This video is not just about the boy who threw the rock. It's about understanding what it means to be human in a world that often feels disconnected. We're all part of a larger story, and sometimes we forget the impact we can have on someone's life with the simplest actions. Stay with me, and I'll show you how a single moment, a single choice, can change everything. You see, the boy, let's call him Ben, grew up in a world that wasn't kind to him. He didn't know what it meant to respect people, especially people who seemed different from him. He had learned that certain people, like the homeless man he threw the rock at, were to be ignored, dismissed, and avoided. But he didn't know any better. His world had taught him to look away, to keep his distance, and that everyone else had to earn his respect. He never understood the value of showing kindness to those who seemed different, until that stranger in uniform changed his life forever. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Ben's story, the stranger's story, and the lesson they would both learn are more complicated than just a moment of redemption. This isn't a fairy tale where everything wraps up neatly with a bow on top. It's about real people, real emotions, and the real consequences of our actions. It's about taking responsibility, understanding our own biases, and learning to see people for who they truly are, not based on appearances or assumptions, but on the depth of their humanity. As we move forward, I want you to think about this. When was the last time you acted out of anger or frustration without considering the other person's story? When was the last time you judged someone without knowing their full experience? This video isn't just about what happened on that sidewalk that day. It's about how we all have the power to change the narrative in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. Ben's encounter with the stranger in uniform didn't just change the way he saw the homeless man. It changed the way he saw himself. And as we unravel what happens next, you'll begin to understand why that moment was just the beginning of something much bigger than any of us could have predicted. But what exactly did the stranger say to Ben? And how did that simple interaction lead to a shift in his thinking? The answer lies in something that we often overlook in our fast-paced, judgmental world. A simple, unspoken truth that could change the way we all move through life. Now, I can hear you wondering, what happened after the rock was thrown? How did this stranger handle the situation? Well, keep watching because what comes next is something that will not only surprise you, but also leave you questioning your own beliefs about respect, empathy, and how we treat the people around us. This is just the beginning, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. So, are you ready for the story that will shift your perspective? Are you prepared to see the world through someone else's eyes? Stay with me, and let's dive deeper into this moment that would change everything for Ben and for all of us. You're not just watching a story unfold. You're about to see a lesson that can reshape your own approach to life. It's not about the rock. It's not even about the boy. It's about something much more profound. What happens next will not only answer the questions you have right now, but it will also challenge you to think about your own place in the world and how you, too, can make a difference in the lives of others. Are you ready to find out? Keep watching. The best part of the story is still to come. As Ben stood there, watching the homeless man on the sidewalk, his mind raced with confusion and frustration. He had been living in the city for most of his life, and in many ways, it had shaped his worldview, one that was full of indifference. He didn't remember much of his childhood, but the pieces he did recall weren't exactly comforting. He had grown up with a single mother who struggled to make ends meet. Money was tight, and there was little room for anything beyond the bare necessities. Ben was no stranger to feeling the sting of neglect and resentment, and it wasn't unusual for him to act out in frustration. He wasn't proud of the rock he had thrown, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to release the anger that had been building inside him for so long. Ben's actions didn't come out of nowhere. Over the past few weeks, he'd been on edge. School was hard, but it wasn't just the grades that were dragging him down. It was the constant pressure to be someone he wasn't. His friends, if you could call them that, had made it clear that they didn't expect him to care about the problems of others, especially people who were struggling. Why bother with them, they'd say. They're not worth your time. It was this kind of mentality that had infected Ben's thinking, like a virus he couldn't shake. They had all made it clear that only the strong and the successful deserved attention, while the weak, the homeless, and the less fortunate were to be ignored, dismissed, or even mocked. Ben had fallen into that pattern of thinking, and without anyone to challenge it, he became numb to the suffering of others. The homeless man he had thrown the rock at was just another reminder of the world's flaws. In Ben's eyes, it wasn't his problem, so why should he care? But as much as Ben wanted to keep moving through life without thinking about the consequences of his actions, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The stranger who had stopped him, the man in uniform, had an energy that Ben couldn't quite put his finger on. There was an authority about him, but not in the way that teachers or police officers carried it. This man had something different, a presence that demanded respect, not because of his position, but because of something deeper, something more ingrained in the way he carried himself. And the way he had looked at Ben, there was something in those eyes, something that made Ben feel seen. It wasn't just the kind of look you'd get from someone who disapproved or judged. It was as though the man had seen Ben's soul, his pain, his frustration, and was not afraid to confront it head-on. Ben felt the sudden weight of his own actions, but he was far from ready to face them. Who was this man, really? What was his story? And more importantly, why had he taken such an interest in Ben's moment of cruelty? These questions lingered in the back of Ben's mind as he walked away from the scene, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling the stranger had left him with. He couldn't help but replay the moment over and over. The homeless man, the rock, the sudden intervention. All of it felt like a strange twist of fate. But was it fate? Or was there something more at play here? In the following days, Ben found himself struggling to focus on anything, school, friends, even the video games he usually turned to for distraction. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. His mother noticed the shift in his demeanor, but she didn't know how to talk to him about it. Ben had always been distant, and with her own struggles weighing her down, it was hard to know how to reach him. He had grown up under her roof, but there were times when it felt like they were living in two separate worlds, neither one able to understand the other. She never asked about the rock-throwing incident. To her, it was just another sign of Ben's rebellious nature. She couldn't know what the stranger's intervention had done to her son. And yet, Ben knew he couldn't shake it off so easily. It was like a seed had been planted inside him, a question that wouldn't stop growing. Why did this man care about him? Why did he stop to talk to him when so many others would have kept walking? As days passed, Ben tried to forget the encounter, but the stranger's face haunted him. It wasn't just the way the man had stopped him, it was the way he had spoken, calm, measured, and almost as if he had already known Ben's entire life story before he even opened his mouth. He had mentioned something about respect, about how every person, no matter their situation, deserved to be treated with dignity. But Ben didn't get it. How could he? In his world, respect was something that had to be earned, not freely given. Was this man delusional, or was he onto something that Ben had never considered? The more Ben thought about it, the more questions started to pile up. Who exactly was this stranger, and why had he chosen to intervene at that moment? What did he know about Ben that Ben didn't even know about himself? In a world full of people rushing by, ignoring those who were less fortunate, why had this man decided to stop? Was there something about Ben that made him a target for this kind of intervention? Could it be that the man had seen more in him than he saw in himself? Ben didn't have the answers, and as much as he tried to push the thoughts away, they kept creeping back in. The more he looked at the homeless man, sitting in the same spot every day, the more he began to see him differently. He started to wonder about his story. Who was this man really? How had he ended up on the streets? What was his life like before the rock had hit him? The questions swirled in Ben's mind, and for the first time, he realized that the world wasn't as simple as he had once thought. There were layers to it, layers of pain, of struggle, of stories untold. And just when Ben thought he might finally get some clarity, he saw the stranger again. This time, he wasn't alone. And as the group walked by, Ben caught a glimpse of something in their hands, a badge. His heart skipped a beat. Was this man a cop? A veteran? Someone who had seen the worst of the world and still believed in kindness? Or was there something else, something more hidden beneath the surface? Ben's questions only deepened, and the mystery of the stranger's true identity became even more compelling. But in that moment, Ben couldn't walk away, not this time. Something was calling him back, pulling him into the mystery, into the heart of the unknown. And with every step, the questions only became more pressing. Was he truly ready to learn the lesson this stranger had to offer? Or was he too far gone, trapped in a world where cruelty seemed easier than compassion? This story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Ben's curiosity about the stranger only deepened with each passing day, but as he dug deeper into the mystery, things began to get more complicated than he had ever expected. He tried to start where it made sense, by asking around the neighborhood, hoping to find some clue about the man in uniform. But each conversation seemed to lead him further into a maze of confusion, and the more he looked, the more elusive everything became. He spoke to a few locals who had seen the man before, but their recollections were scattered and vague, almost as if they were deliberately avoiding the subject. Some simply said they'd never seen him before, others mentioned that he was always just passing through, as if the man had no real ties to the place. But the one thing that stood out in every conversation was the strange silence that followed any mention of him. It was as though people knew something Ben didn't, but they weren't willing to share it. The man had clearly made an impact on Ben, but it seemed that he was also a figure that was too dangerous to investigate too closely. Frustrated and desperate for a breakthrough, Ben turned to a local coffee shop that he frequented. It was a quiet spot where he could sit alone, drink his usual iced coffee, and let his thoughts wander without too many distractions. He had noticed a woman behind the counter who always seemed to be there, and after a few visits, he struck up a casual conversation with her. Her name was Emily, and she had a soft, kind demeanor that made it easy for Ben to open up. Without revealing too much, he began asking her about the man in uniform, describing him in the most neutral way he could manage, hoping she might know something that would lead him closer to the truth. But her response sent a chill down his spine. Emily's face tightened ever so slightly, and for a brief moment, it was like she was trying to decide whether or not to answer. Then, in a low voice, she warned him. "You shouldn't be asking about him," she said. "It's not safe." Ben was taken aback by her sudden shift in tone. What did she mean by not safe? He pressed her for more, but she only shook her head and quickly changed the subject, offering him his coffee with a forced smile. But something in the way she reacted made Ben realize that there was far more to this than he had first thought. It wasn't just the man in uniform he had to worry about. It was the people who knew him, the ones who seemed afraid to even mention his name. Was this stranger some kind of dangerous figure, or was there something else lurking beneath the surface of their interactions? The warning left Ben unsettled, but he couldn't let it go. It only fueled his desire to uncover the truth, even if it meant putting himself in harm's way. Days passed, and Ben found himself following every lead he could. He returned to the spot where he had first seen the stranger, hoping for some kind of sign or a second encounter, but instead, he was greeted by nothing but empty streets. It was as if the man had disappeared entirely, as though he had never existed at all. Ben checked local news reports, searching for any mention of someone fitting the description of the stranger, but there was nothing. It was as if the man had vanished without a trace, and the more Ben searched, the more it seemed like the entire city was deliberately hiding something. His frustration began to mount, and the doubts started to creep in. What if he was chasing shadows? What if the man had never been anything more than a figment of his imagination, a projection of guilt that had taken form in his mind? Just as Ben was about to give up, something unexpected happened. A piece of crucial evidence, something that could have finally answered his questions, mysteriously vanished. It was a small, folded piece of paper that he had found tucked under a park bench near the coffee shop where he had been sitting when he first overheard Emily's warning. On it, there was a phone number, followed by an address, both written in a scrawled, hurried hand. Ben had been careful not to lose it, thinking it might be the key to understanding the man's true identity. But the next morning, when he went back to retrieve it, the bench was empty. The paper had disappeared, as if it had never been there at all. It didn't make any sense.
Who could have taken it? And why?
His frustration and confusion grew, but what was even more unsettling was the feeling that he was being watched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Ben couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him, tracking his every move. He tried to ignore it, but it only made him more paranoid, and the walls began to close in. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get any stranger, another person stepped into the picture, someone Ben hadn't expected. A man named Tom, who appeared to know more about the stranger than he had let on. Ben met him by chance at a local diner when Tom overheard him talking about the man in uniform. Tom was older, rugged-looking, and gave off the vibe of someone who had lived through more than his fair share of tough situations. He wasn't the type to strike up random conversations, but there was something about Ben's questions that piqued his interest. At first, Tom was reluctant to speak, but after a few minutes, he leaned in close and whispered, "You're digging in the wrong direction. Stop now while you still can." Ben was stunned. Who was this man, and why was he so invested in stopping him from uncovering the truth? It was like Tom knew something about the situation that Ben wasn't privy to. His words didn't make sense, but there was an urgency in his voice that made Ben pause. Was Tom trying to protect him, or was he simply trying to cover something up? It was hard to tell. Tom's warning was so sudden, and the way he had looked around the diner before speaking made it clear that he didn't want anyone else to overhear. His eyes darted nervously, like he was afraid of someone overhearing him. But Ben couldn't back down now. The mystery was too deep, too compelling. He wasn't going to stop just because someone told him to. The more people tried to steer him away from the truth, the more determined he became. Was Tom another obstacle in his path? Or was he an ally, someone who could help him unlock the last piece of the puzzle? As the pieces of the puzzle began to shift, Ben realized that the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. The truth, whatever it was, seemed just out of reach, and every time he thought he was getting closer, something or someone threw him off course. The strange disappearance of the paper, The cryptic warning from Emily and Tom's ominous message all seemed to point towards something darker, something hidden in plain sight. Was the stranger in the uniform truly who he appeared to be, or was there a hidden past that no one wanted Ben to uncover? The answers were slipping further away with every step Ben took. But one thing was certain. He couldn't back down now. He was too close, and he needed to know the truth. As the days dragged on, the tension surrounding Ben's investigation only grew stronger, and with it, the overwhelming sense that something was terribly wrong. He had already felt the heat on his heels from all sides, but just when he thought things couldn't get any more complicated, another twist unfolded, this time, not to him, but to someone he cared about. His older sister, Rachel, had always been his rock, a steady presence in his life who kept him grounded, but lately, she had been pulling away, distracted by something. At first, Ben thought it was just stress from her job, or maybe personal issues that she didn't want to share, but that all changed one afternoon when she came to him looking visibly shaken. Something in her eyes told him that whatever was going on was more than she was letting on. It wasn't like Rachel to hide things, especially from him, so when she pulled him aside at their family's house, her hands trembling slightly, Ben knew something had changed. Ben, I need you to listen to me. I've been getting strange calls, messages I don't understand. I don't know what to make of them, she said, her voice barely a whisper, as though afraid someone might be listening. I think it has something to do with that man you've been asking about. Her words hit Ben like a punch to the gut. What did Rachel know about the man in uniform? Was there something he missed, some detail about the case that she had been privy to all along? Rachel explained that she had received anonymous texts over the past few days, cryptic messages that mirrored Ben's own suspicions. The first one was short, simple. Stop asking questions about the soldier. The second, a few days later, read, You're looking in the wrong place. The third was the most chilling. Don't let him get too close. The fact that these messages were coming to Rachel, someone who had no apparent connection to the investigation, made everything feel even more sinister.
Who was sending them?
And why was she being dragged into this web of mystery? Ben felt his stomach drop as the implications started to set in. Whoever was behind these messages clearly had a vested interest in silencing anyone who dared to ask about the man in uniform, and now Rachel was involved. It wasn't just his fight anymore. As much as he wanted to protect his sister, he couldn't ignore the fact that their paths had crossed in ways he didn't understand. The pieces were coming together in ways he couldn't quite grasp, and it was becoming clear that there was someone, or something, lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on anyone who got too close to the truth. Still, Ben couldn't back down, not now. But it wasn't just the anonymous text that had him on edge. It was the way Rachel seemed to be unraveling, her face pale, her eyes constantly darting around as if she were being watched. It was as if the messages were only the tip of the iceberg. Rachel mentioned a conversation she'd overheard while at work, a low-key chat in the break room, where one of her coworkers, someone who worked at the same company for years, had said something strange. They're keeping an eye on him, the coworker had whispered. He's getting too close to the truth. Who was she referring to? And why would Rachel's coworker be talking about Ben? That was the moment when everything shifted. It wasn't just about the man in uniform anymore. It was about everyone around him, the people he trusted, the ones who seemed to be protecting something far darker than he ever could have imagined. Rachel's revelation opened a door to a deeper layer of the mystery, one that Ben wasn't prepared to face. The stakes were higher now, and the danger wasn't just coming from the stranger in the uniform. It was coming from everyone in Ben's life who might have been hiding something, including Rachel herself. But she didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went, and Ben knew that he couldn't involve her any further. He needed to protect her, even if it meant keeping the truth from her for a little longer. Yet, as the mystery continued to grow, so did the strange occurrences. A new piece of evidence had just appeared in the most unexpected of places. Ben was sorting through his old things in his room when he came across an old journal he had kept from his high school days. He hadn't opened it in years, but something made him flip through the pages now. At first, it seemed like nothing more than random musings of a teenager, but as he went further into the journal, he found an entry that made his blood run cold. It was a single sentence, hastily written in a rush. "The soldier in the uniform isn't who you think he is." Ben froze, staring at the words. He hadn't written it, and there was no way he had ever seen those words before. The handwriting wasn't his. It was different, slanted, almost erratic. This was the first time he had ever seen this note, and its timing felt too deliberate to be a coincidence. How had it gotten there? Had someone planted it in his journal, hoping to confuse him? Or was it a warning, a message meant to guide him towards something he had overlooked? As if the situation wasn't already fraught with enough uncertainty, another bizarre turn of events occurred shortly after Ben made that discovery. A new witness came forward, a man who claimed to have seen the soldier, but his story was full of contradictions. At first, the man spoke with complete certainty, describing the uniform, the way the soldier had been standing near the park on the night of Ben's first encounter, even the type of car he had been driving. But when Ben pressed him for more details, his recollections became hazy, and the inconsistencies piled up. Was the man lying? Or was he simply confused? Everything he said contradicted what Ben knew to be true, and the more Ben tried to dig into his background, the more elusive the man became. With every new clue, the mystery became even more tangled, and the lines between friend and foe blurred. The deeper Ben dug, the more questions he had. Everyone seemed to have a part to play in this puzzle, and each new twist made him wonder if anyone in his life was as innocent as they seemed. Was Tom, the man who warned him to stop digging, really trying to protect him? Or was he part of the conspiracy? Was Rachel somehow tied to all of this, even if she didn't know it? And what about Emily, the coffee shop worker who had seemed so friendly at first? Was she hiding something from Ben too? Ben had no choice but to keep moving forward, but now, with more people involved and more layers to the story, it felt like he was on the edge of a precipice. Every decision could make things worse, and yet, he couldn't stop himself from pressing on. There were too many unanswered questions. Too many clues leading him in conflicting directions. One thing was certain. The truth wasn't just elusive, it was actively trying to escape him. And the more he searched, the more he realized that the only thing certain in this tangled web of lies was that nothing, absolutely nothing, was as it seemed. The weight of everything that had happened so far settled heavily on Ben's chest as the days dragged on, but it wasn't until that fateful evening that he realized just how much danger he was truly in. The day had started like any other, with him trying to piece together the strange puzzle he had found himself tangled in. Yet, as he sat at his desk that night, working through old photographs of the man in uniform and cross-referencing them with the bizarre entries in his journal, something inside him snapped. A strange, nagging feeling had begun to take hold of him, the kind of intuition that whispered things weren't as simple as they seemed. It was almost as if the shadows themselves were conspiring against him, quietly shifting in the corners of his vision, always just out of sight. He couldn't shake the sensation that someone was watching him, even when he was alone in the dimly lit room. At first, he chalked it up to stress, the sheer exhaustion from endless hours of investigation, but as the evening wore on, the feeling intensified. He noticed the soft sounds outside his window, footsteps that came and went, always at odd intervals, never lingering long enough to confirm his suspicions. He checked his phone, but there were no missed calls, no new messages from Rachel, or from anyone else who might have been keeping tabs on him. Yet, the gnawing sense of being followed was undeniable, and it felt as though his world had shifted ever so slightly. Ben's heart started to race as he sat frozen in his chair, waiting for something to happen. The room felt smaller now, suffocatingly so, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Without warning, the phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a moment, Ben thought about ignoring it. He had been getting calls from unfamiliar numbers for days, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the way the ring echoed in the silence of the room, or maybe it was just the growing sense of dread that had begun to overtake him. He answered it, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to keep it steady. There was no response at first, just the sound of heavy breathing on the other end. Then, a voice, low, muffled, as though the person was speaking through clenched teeth, spoke the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "You're asking too many questions. Stop now, or things will get worse." Ben's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. He tried to say something, anything, but the line went dead before he could get a word out. The sudden silence that followed felt deafening, and for a moment, he just stared at the phone, unable to make sense of what had just happened. Who was it? What did they mean by "things will get worse"? And why had they targeted him, specifically? The questions swirled around in his head like a storm, each one more terrifying than the last, and with each passing second, the weight of the situation grew heavier. He tried to shake off the unease that gripped him, but as he glanced out the window once again, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A shadow, moving quickly across the street outside, disappearing into the darkness just as swiftly as it had appeared. Ben's first instinct was to turn away, to convince himself that it was nothing, but the longer he stared, the more certain he became that someone was out there, watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to make their move. The chilling thought crossed his mind that the person in the shadow had been there for longer than he realized, maybe even while he was sitting at his desk, going through the old photos and clues. His thoughts raced as he quickly grabbed his keys, heart pounding in his chest. He had to go. He couldn't stay here anymore. Not with the phone call, not with the eerie figure outside. He didn't feel safe anywhere. Ben stepped outside, the cool night air rushing to meet him, but as he walked toward his car, his mind kept replaying everything: the cryptic messages, the threats, Rachel's strange behavior, the eerie phone call. It was all spiraling out of control, and he knew that he couldn't just ignore it any longer. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. But the moment he turned the corner onto a street, something froze him in his tracks. Rachel's car was parked in front of his house. She had been to visit earlier, and she was supposed to be home by now. But there was no sign of her anywhere. Ben's heart skipped a beat as a sense of panic started to rise within him. Why was her car still here? Where was she? Was she in danger too? He rushed inside, calling her name, his voice echoing in the empty house. No response. His chest tightened as he moved from room to room, searching for her. But just as quickly as the panic had set in, a strange calmness fell over him, like the quiet before a storm. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the messages, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain where she was. That's when he saw it. A new text from Rachel, sent just moments ago. But it wasn't from her. The message was brief, yet its meaning was crystal clear. If you want her back, stop digging. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Whoever had sent the message had taken Rachel, and they were using her as leverage to force him to stop asking questions. But Ben couldn't stop now, not when he was so close to the truth. The realization hit him hard, and a chill ran down his spine. He was deep into something far darker than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just the soldier, or the man in uniform, or even the cryptic clues. No, this was bigger, and the stakes were far higher. Whoever was behind this wouldn't hesitate to hurt the people he loved to protect their secrets. Rachel was just the beginning, and he knew in his gut that things were only going to get worse from here. As the minutes stretched into hours, Ben's mind raced with frantic thoughts. Thoughts of Rachel, of the soldiers, of the cryptic messages, and he realized he was trapped in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Someone was always one step ahead, and the deeper he dug, the more he realized that there was no going back. The truth was elusive, slipping through his fingers like sand, and the only thing that seemed certain was that the danger was real. Someone had made it clear. If he wanted Rachel back, if he wanted to survive, he had to stop asking questions. But Ben wasn't going to stop.
Not now.
Not when he was so close to understanding everything. The only question that remained was whether he could survive long enough to uncover the truth. And what, or who, would he lose in the process? As the days wore on, Ben grew more desperate. The message he had received from Rachel's phone, the cryptic words that threatened her life, had forced him into a corner, with every action feeling more like a dangerous game of chess than a fight for the truth. He hadn't heard from her since that ominous text, and the weight of his failure to protect her pressed down on him, crushing his resolve. In an attempt to dig deeper into the mystery, he revisited everything once more, every photo, every conversation, every document, and still, It felt as though he was missing something, a key piece that he couldn't quite find. The answers were close, yet just out of reach, as if someone had carefully planned every step to make sure he was always a few paces behind. His thoughts wandered back to the stranger in the uniform, the man he had initially thought of as the catalyst to this entire nightmare. But now a new realization began to creep into his mind. What if the uniform wasn't a symbol of protection, as he had originally believed? What if it was a mask? The man in the uniform had appeared at just the right time, just when Ben had begun to ask too many questions. Was he part of a larger game, pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Had the entire investigation been a carefully orchestrated set of events, meant to lead Ben into a trap? The possibility was terrifying, and it made Ben question everything he thought he knew about the people around him. And then, just as he was ready to confront the man in the uniform, another shocking development shattered the fragile illusion of safety he had been clinging to. It was a phone call, but not from Rachel. This time, it was from someone he hadn't heard from in years. His old mentor, Detective Harris, a man he had trusted like a second father, had gotten wind of his investigation. Ben picked up the phone, but before he could say a word, Harris's voice cut through the line, urgent and laced with an unfamiliar edge. "You need to stop, Ben. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Ben's chest tightened as the words sunk in. Harris had always been a straight shooter, a no-nonsense kind of guy who never pulled punches. But this was different. The panic in his voice was palpable, and the desperation was something Ben had never heard before. "What are you talking about?" "I have to find Rachel. They've taken her, Harris. She's in danger. I need your help," Ben pleaded, his voice trembling with emotion. But Harris's reply was nothing short of shocking. "Rachel's gone, Ben. She's been gone for longer than you think. And you've been playing right into their hands." Ben's stomach dropped as Harris continued, the weight of the revelation starting to crush him from all sides. "You've been looking at this all wrong. The man in the uniform, the messages, everything, it's all connected, but not the way you think. Rachel, she's not who you think she is." Ben's breath caught in his throat. "What are you talking about?" "She's my fiancée. She's the love of my life. She would never—" "No, Ben," Harris interrupted, his voice low and tense. "She's part of something much bigger than you realize. She's been working with them from the start. I don't know how far back it goes, but I know enough to tell you. You're in way over your head." The words hung in the air, chilling Ben to his core. Rachel? A part of this? It couldn't be true. She couldn't have been lying to him all this time. But as the words lingered in his mind, a nagging thought began to gnaw at him. There had been little things, small details that he had brushed off, moments when she had seemed distant, when she hesitated, when she acted as if she was hiding something. But he had always pushed those thoughts aside, blinded by his love for her, his desire to believe in their future together. "You have to stop looking for her, Ben," Harris said, his voice almost pleading now. "You're walking into a trap. I can't help you anymore. The people you're up against, they're not who you think they are. The truth you're searching for is far darker than you realize." "And Harris's voice faltered, before the lines suddenly went dead. Ben stood there, frozen, the weight of Harris's words echoing in his mind like a drumbeat. His heart raced as he processed everything he had just learned. Rachel had been a part of this twisted game all along. Was she really behind everything, manipulating him, using him as a pawn? The questions kept coming, each one more unbearable than the last. And then, as if on cue, another text flashed across his phone screen, sent from Rachel's number. This time, there was no message, only a single photo. It was a picture of Rachel, but it wasn't the Rachel he knew. This version of her was standing next to someone Ben had never seen before, a man in a suit, smiling in a way that sent a cold shiver down his spine. The man was holding something in his hand, a small, black book, worn at the edges, as though it had been passed through many hands over the years. But it wasn't the book that caught Ben's attention. It was the strange symbol emblazoned on its cover, something that looked eerily familiar. And then, just as the weight of this new revelation began to sink in, the final bombshell dropped. The man in the suit wasn't just any stranger. He was the same man from the photos Ben had uncovered earlier, the man in uniform who had been linked to the mysterious events surrounding Rachel's disappearance. Ben's world shifted beneath him as the truth began to form, piece by piece. Everything, the threats, the clues, the strange messages, Rachel's sudden disappearance, had been meticulously planned, and he had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. The realization crashed down on him with brutal force. He had been lied to from the start. But by who?
And why?
The picture burned in his mind, and Ben felt the walls of his world begin to crumble. The people he had trusted, the ones he had believed were on his side, had been playing him all along. And now, with Rachel's betrayal hanging over him, Ben was left with only one choice: to keep going, to keep digging, even though everything he thought he knew was a lie. But one thing was certain now: the deeper he went, the more dangerous the path would become. The phone in Ben's hand trembled as he stared at the photo of Rachel with the man in the suit, the symbol on the book mocking him in its cryptic, almost sinister design. His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest, but one question screamed louder than the others. How could she do this to him? Rachel, his fiancée, the person he trusted above all, had been lying to him all along. The man in the suit, the symbol, the warnings from Detective Harris, everything was pointing to one terrifying conclusion: Rachel had been part of something much darker than he could have ever imagined. The truth, that elusive thing he had been chasing, was slipping further away from him, and now Ben found himself at the center of a storm he could no longer control. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. He hesitated before playing it, knowing deep down it would bring him closer to a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The voice that filled his ears was cold, unfamiliar, and dripping with authority. Ben, you need to make a choice. If you want Rachel back, you'll have to let go of this investigation. Stop digging into things you don't understand. It's your last chance. Keep going, and there will be consequences. Consequences you won't survive. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The man's voice was eerily calm, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. His mind raced, spinning with possibilities. Was it another trap? Was this man really someone connected to Rachel's disappearance, or was it a sick game designed to break him down? Ben had come too far to back down now, but the weight of the ultimatum loomed heavy over him. Stop the investigation and save Rachel, or keep going and risk losing everything. The choice seemed impossible. How could he choose between the woman he loved and the truth that had consumed him? The stakes had never been higher. His thoughts were clouded with guilt, doubt, and fear. He couldn't ignore the dark reality he was facing anymore. The truth was far more dangerous than he could have imagined, and the deeper he dug, the more perilous the situation became. He had already lost so much, and now, standing at the precipice of an impossible choice, Ben was torn between his love for Rachel and the promise he had made to uncover the truth. The uncertainty gnawed at him, and the words of Detective Harris echoed in his mind, growing louder with every passing second. You're in way over your head. He couldn't stop thinking about the man in the suit, the mysterious figure who had appeared in Rachel's photo, standing there with that same cryptic symbol that had now haunted him for days. There was something wrong about it, something far more insidious than a simple coincidence. But what if Rachel was truly involved in this? What if she wasn't the victim he had believed her to be? The idea of confronting her, of asking her to explain her actions, made Ben's stomach churn. He couldn't shake the image of her smiling in that photo, her expression so calm and composed while he was left reeling with unanswered questions. But then, as if on cue, Ben received another message, a simple text from Rachel. It was just a single line. I need to talk. Meet me at the park in 30 minutes. His pulse quickened.
Was this it?
Was she finally going to explain everything? Or was this yet another trap designed to push him further into a game he didn't understand? The uncertainty was killing him, but he couldn't ignore the desperation in her words. Was this his chance to get to the truth? Or was it a final test, a last move in a game where he no longer knew the rules? He stared at the screen for a moment longer before making a decision. He couldn't back down now, not when he was so close to finding the answers. But as he stood up, preparing to leave, another thought struck him with devastating clarity. What if Rachel wasn't the one who needed saving? What if he was the one in danger, and he was too blind to see it? The park was eerily quiet when Ben arrived. The air felt thick with tension, the distant hum of the city nothing more than a low murmur that added to the surreal atmosphere of the moment. He scanned the area, his eyes darting nervously as he searched for Rachel. There was no sign of her. His heart pounded in his chest, the waiting more unbearable with every passing second. Just as he was about to call her phone, a shadow appeared behind him, and Ben turned quickly. His breath caught in his throat when he saw who it was, Detective Harris, standing there with a grim expression. "Ben, you shouldn't be here," Harris said, his voice low but urgent. "This is a mistake." "I'm not going anywhere until I talk to her," Ben shot back, his voice full of defiance. But Harris didn't flinch. His eyes were full of regret, but there was something else there too: fear. "Listen to me, Ben. It's not just Rachel you're dealing with. The people behind this, they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way. You have no idea how deep this goes, and you don't want to be caught in the crossfire." Harris stepped closer, his face intense. "If you want to live, you need to leave. Now." The urgency in Harris's voice sent a chill through Ben. His grip tightened around his phone as the cold reality of the situation crashed down on him. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. He wasn't just chasing a missing person or uncovering a conspiracy. He was tangled in something much larger, much darker than he had ever realized. "I don't care what you say, Harris. I'm not walking away now. I'll do whatever it takes to find the truth," Ben said, his voice trembling with resolve, but deep down, he knew that the path he was choosing was leading him further into danger than he could have ever anticipated. Harris hesitated, his eyes shifting nervously as if weighing his options. Finally, he spoke in a near whisper. "You're making a huge mistake, Ben. But if you're going to do this, at least know one thing. There's someone else involved. Someone close to you. Someone you wouldn't expect. And once you find out who it is, you'll wish you had never started this investigation." Ben's heart raced, and for a split second, he was paralyzed with fear. Who could Harris be talking about? Someone close to him? Someone he trusted? Before he could ask, Harris turned abruptly and disappeared into the shadows of the park, leaving Ben standing alone, the words echoing in his mind, louder than ever. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew unbearable. Rachel had yet to show up, and with every passing second, the sense of dread in Ben's gut deepened. What had he gotten himself into? And who could he really trust anymore? The questions swirled in his mind as he realized that his next steps could very well be the last ones he ever took. Ben's phone vibrated in his pocket, pulling him from the swirl of panic and confusion that had consumed his every thought. He pulled it out, and the screen illuminated, showing an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was distorted, but there was no mistaking the coldness that dripped from each word. "You're getting closer, Ben. But that's a mistake. You're playing in a game that's much bigger than you. Much bigger than Rachel, too." Ben's heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" he demanded, the grip on his phone tightening as his knuckles went white. A low, almost mocking laugh echoed through the phone. "You'll find out soon enough. But I need you to understand something. Everyone you trust is a pawn in this. Everyone you've ever cared about. You're being used. And you won't make it out of this. Not if you keep pushing." The words hung in the air, the weight of them sinking in like lead. Ben's mind reeled. Everyone you trust is a pawn. The thought rattled him to his core. His hands were shaking as he ended the call, but the message was already clear. This was much bigger than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about something far darker, something sinister that had been hidden in plain sight for who knows how long. And suddenly, Ben felt the full scope of what he had been up against all along. The conspiracy was sprawling, encompassing far more than the small world he had inhabited up until this point. It was a network of people, each piece perfectly orchestrated, with motives that he had yet to even comprehend. The image of the man in the suit from the photograph, the cryptic symbol, the constant surveillance, none of it was random. They were all connected, and Ben had stumbled into the middle of something far more dangerous than he ever thought possible. But who was behind it? And why was he being dragged into it? Just as he thought he might lose his grip on the situation entirely, the truth began to form. Detective Harris's warning echoed again in his mind. There's someone else involved. Someone close to you. The feeling of betrayal sank in slowly, like ice running through his veins. It wasn't just Rachel. Someone else, someone he'd trusted, had been playing him. A sudden flash of clarity hit Ben like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just Rachel, and it wasn't just Harris. It was someone who had been in his life, working quietly from the shadows, pulling strings behind the scenes. And then it hit him. The person behind all of this. It was his brother Adam. The thought shook him to his core. He couldn't fathom it. His brother, the one person in the world who had always had his back, the one who'd stood by him through thick and thin. Could it really be true? Was Adam part of this twisted conspiracy? The idea felt like a punch to the stomach, as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. But the more Ben thought about it, the more it made sense. Adam had always been involved in strange business deals, in things Ben had never fully understood. And now those deals were starting to look a lot more sinister. Ben's stomach turned as he realized the enormity of what he was facing. The conspiracy wasn't just about Rachel or even him anymore. This had grown into a fight for survival, one where everyone he cared about could be pulled into the darkness with him, and there was no telling who would make it out alive. Desperation flooded Ben's veins as the pressure mounted. The phone call, Harris's warning, and the revelation about his brother sent him spiraling. He was out of his depth, tangled in something far beyond his ability to control. He couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not Rachel. Not Harris. Not even Adam. As if on cue, Ben received another message. It was from Adam. Meet me at the old warehouse. It's time you know the truth. The message sent a chill down Ben's spine. The truth? What truth? What had his brother gotten himself mixed up in? Ben's eyes flickered to the parking lot across the street, where he saw a car with dark-tinted windows idling, as if watching him. Someone was following him. Someone knew he was about to make a move. And the idea of meeting Adam, of walking right into the lion's den, made his pulse race in fear. Was this a trap? Or was this the moment where everything would be laid bare? Ben didn't have time to waste. The weight of the decision whether to go or not was pressing down on him. But the truth hung just out of reach, like a distant light he had to grasp, no matter how dangerous it was to do so. With the decision made, Ben's grip tightened on the wheel as he started the car, his heart pounding in his chest as he drove toward the warehouse. He wasn't sure who he could trust anymore, but one thing was certain. The time for answers had come. The streets grew quieter the further he drove, and the sense of dread intensified with every mile. The warehouse loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette cutting against the night sky like a grim monument to the twisted path he had found himself on. The car pulled to a stop, its headlights cutting through the darkened parking lot, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. Ben stepped out, his breath coming in sharp, nervous bursts. He wasn't sure what to expect when he walked through those doors, but the danger felt palpable, like a thick fog hanging in the air, closing in around him. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing the empty interior of the warehouse. The silence was deafening. His footsteps echoed as he walked deeper into the vast space, every corner hiding secrets he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He reached the center of the room, his heart racing, eyes darting around for any sign of movement. And then he heard it, a voice from the shadows, cold and unfeeling, sending chills down his spine. "Ben, you shouldn't have come." Ben spun around, his pulse pounding in his ears. There, standing in the dim light, was his brother Adam. But something was wrong. His eyes were empty, as if all warmth had been drained from him. The man standing before Ben was no longer the brother he'd once known. This was someone else entirely, someone far darker. "Adam," Ben whispered, disbelief and betrayal rising in his throat. "What is this? What's going on?" Adam's lips curled into a sinister smile. "It's too late, Ben. You've already dug too deep." He stepped closer, his movements calculated and deliberate. You should have stayed out of this. Now you're in danger, just like the others. The weight of Adam's words hit Ben like a freight train. The danger wasn't just from the people behind the conspiracy, it was from the people closest to him. And now, Ben had no idea who he could trust, or if he would make it out alive. Ben stood frozen in the dim light of the warehouse, his mind racing. His brother, Adam, was standing in front of him, but this wasn't the same man he had once trusted with his life. The man who had always been there when things went wrong. The man who had shared his childhood, his fears, his triumphs. Adam had always been the anchor, the safe place in a world full of chaos. But now, Ben could barely recognize him. Adam's face was blank, emotionless, as if he had shed every ounce of humanity, leaving only a cold, calculating shell. You've gone too far. Adam's voice cut through the air, as calm and chilling as ice. You should have stayed out of it. The people behind this are powerful. You can't win. Ben felt the weight of Adam's words settle in his chest. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Everything he had uncovered, every clue he had followed, had been leading him here. This wasn't just a conspiracy. It wasn't just some shadowy group pulling the strings.
It was bigger than that.
And Adam, his brother, had been right in the middle of it all. Why, Adam? Ben's voice trembled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Why didn't you tell me? Why drag me into this? Adam's lips twitched, and for the first time, Ben saw a flicker of something: guilt? Regret? It was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, emotionless gaze he had come to fear. You never asked the right questions. You were too busy being a hero, thinking you could make a difference. But this is bigger than you, bigger than anyone. It was always going to be this way. Ben's fists clenched, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment. The truth was finally out, but the revelation felt like a sinking weight. His brother, his family, was a part of the very thing he had been fighting against. And the people behind this were far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. A sound from behind snapped him back to the present. Ben spun around, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and figures stepped into the light, their faces obscured by dark masks. His pulse quickened. More of them. The shadowy figures he'd feared were now here, closing in on him. This wasn't just about Adam anymore. There were more people involved, people who would do whatever it took to keep their secrets buried. Ben, one of the masked figures said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. It's over. You've seen too much, and now you need to pay the price for your curiosity. Ben's heart raced, but his resolve hardened. He had come too far to turn back now. I'm not going down without a fight, he said through gritted teeth. His eyes darted to the side, searching for any way out, any opportunity to turn the tide. Adam's gaze never left him, and for a split second, Ben saw a hint of hesitation in his brother's eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a sharp, almost cruel smile. You never were cut out for this, Ben, Adam said, his voice betraying no emotion. But if you want to die with some sense of purpose, I guess that's your choice. The tension in the air was suffocating, and Ben felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He had two choices. One, he could fight, even if it meant sacrificing everything: his safety, his future. Or two, he could run and hope to live to fight another day, knowing that this would haunt him forever. But there was no more running. Not anymore. He had spent his whole life trusting the wrong people, believing the lies. Now it was time to take a stand, no matter the cost. With a sudden, sharp movement, Ben lunged for a nearby metal pipe, his fingers wrapping around its cold surface. The figures in the shadows moved quickly, and before Ben could even make a strike, one of them lunged forward, grabbing him by the wrist and twisting it behind his back. A scream of pain escaped Ben's lips as he struggled to break free. But the grip was unrelenting, and another figure stepped forward, a gun glinting in the low light. The barrel was aimed squarely at Ben's chest. Enough, Ben, Adam said softly, his voice almost sad. You've lost. This is bigger than you. It always was. Ben's breath hitched, his body frozen in fear. This was it. The end of the line. He was staring death in the face, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he had the strength to face it. The weight of everything, his family's betrayal, the lives ruined by the conspiracy, the people who had been playing him all along, crashed down on him. But then, just as the masked figure's finger began to tighten on the trigger, something changed. A sharp noise echoed through the warehouse, gunfire. But it wasn't from the masked figure. The shot rang out again, but this time it struck the gunman in the shoulder, sending him staggering backward. Ben's heart raced as the figure collapsed, the gun skidding across the floor. The other figures immediately turned to react, but before they could make another move, Ben saw a figure stepping out from the shadows. Harris. The detective, the one person he hadn't trusted, the one who had been following him through this entire mess, was now standing between him and the conspirators. "You think you've won?" Harris's voice was steady, his eyes cold. "You haven't even scratched the surface. This goes way deeper than you know." Ben's mind spun. Harris? The detective had been working with them all along? Or had he been playing his own game? The remaining masked figures hesitated, and in the confusion, Ben grabbed the fallen gun from the floor, quickly spinning to face them. "Get out of my way," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. But the figure who had first spoken, Adam, smiled, his eyes filled with a chilling, almost triumphant expression. "You still don't get it, do you, Ben? You think you can fight back. But the truth is, this is just the beginning. You're too late. The wheels are already in motion." Before Ben could process what Adam meant, everything erupted into chaos. Another shot rang out, followed by shouts, screams, and the sound of scrambling feet. In the confusion, Ben seized the opportunity, firing once more at the nearest figure, forcing him to drop to the ground. Harris, meanwhile, tackled Adam to the floor, their struggle igniting sparks in the darkness. But just as the smoke began to clear, Ben's phone buzzed again, a final message lighting up the screen. It was from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You've only just begun. This is bigger than you, and you're not the one pulling the strings." Ben's heart skipped a beat. There was something far darker looming ahead. The conspiracy wasn't over. It was only just beginning. In the weeks that followed, everything seemed to settle, at least on the surface. The conspiracy that had nearly cost Ben everything, the lies, the betrayals, the dark secrets, seemed to be exposed for the world to see. Adam was arrested, his involvement in the underground organization undeniable. The people who had been pulling the strings, who had orchestrated the mess Ben had walked into, were now in the hands of the authorities. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of peace. But even in that peace, there was a nagging emptiness, a sense of something unresolved that he couldn't shake. The warehouse, the guns, the chaos, it all felt like a lifetime ago, but in the quiet of his apartment, Ben couldn't stop replaying the moments in his head. He had won. But the victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted more like survival. The man he had once trusted as his closest ally was gone, and with him, a piece of Ben's soul. His brother Adam, now behind bars, had always been more than just family. He had been a reflection of what Ben could have been if he hadn't made the choices he did. The guilt still lingered, a sharp ache that refused to fade. Could he have saved him? Could he have turned the tide if he had seen the signs sooner? It was hard to say, and harder to live with. But life, as it always does, moved on. The press coverage around the conspiracy died down, the police reports buried in paperwork, the court hearings a blur of legalese that Ben no longer had the strength to pay attention to. He found solace in the small things: coffee in the mornings, walks through the city, catching up with old friends who hadn't been dragged into the madness. There was a new normal now, one that didn't feel like it belonged to the man he had been before the storm. In a way, that person was gone. And maybe that was for the best. But the phone call came, like a crack in the stillness, a reminder that nothing ever truly ends. It was Harris, still with the department, still walking in the shadows of everything they had uncovered. His voice was just as calm as it had been when he had first appeared in the warehouse, but this time, it was different. "Ben, you need to know something," Harris said, his words clipped urgent. "The people we took down, they weren't the top of the chain. There's more." They had someone pulling their strings, someone you need to know about. Ben's heart dropped, and for a moment, the air in the room felt thick, suffocating. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But even as he spoke, he already knew the answer. "The man who's been behind all of this," Harris continued. "He's still out there. And he's watching you." The weight of Harris's words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Ben tried to wrap his mind around it, but he couldn't. Hadn't he been through enough? Hadn't he fought hard enough to find the truth, to get justice? But it seemed that justice was a fleeting thing, slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he tried to hold on to it. The shadows weren't gone. They were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ben didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, staring at the wall in front of him. The city outside was busy, full of life, and yet, here he was, trapped in a web of secrets he had never fully understood. The battle had only just begun, and everything he thought he knew was still shrouded in mystery. He had pulled the thread that unraveled so much, but what if that thread was just part of something much larger? What if there was no end to this? What if everything he had done, everything he had sacrificed, hadn't been enough? A deep breath escaped him as he sat down on the edge of his couch, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "I'm done running," he said softly, his voice steady, almost resolute. It wasn't just the words he needed to say, it was the decision he had to make. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his life any longer. He wasn't going to be a pawn in someone else's game. But he also knew one thing. The journey wasn't over. And the answers he sought, the ones that had haunted him through every twist and turn, might never come. Maybe some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, just out of reach, teasing the mind and challenging the heart. As Ben hung up the phone, he didn't feel any closer to peace. If anything, he felt more aware of the looming danger. But there was something in him that had changed, something that had hardened through the fire of everything he had experienced. The man he had been, lost, confused, afraid, was gone. The one who remained was someone different. Someone ready to face whatever came next, whether it brought answers or left him with more questions. As he stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city, Ben felt the weight of everything settle in his chest. The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The shadows might never disappear, but for the first time in a long while, Ben wasn't afraid of them. Maybe that was the real victory. Maybe that was what mattered. But as he stared out at the city that felt both familiar and distant, one thing was clear. The war wasn't over, and neither was his search for the truth. The unanswered questions, the mysteries left behind, those were the things that would keep him moving forward. And as the city lights flickered below, Ben knew that somewhere, out there in the darkness, someone was waiting for him to make his next move. And whatever that move was, he would be ready.